I don't know if you picked up any of our brochures about all the trips that we have. In fact, it's on the other side, I guess, of our raffle. When you get to the Philadelphia Orchestra Christmas concert, it isn't in September. It says on there September 20th. It's not September, it's December 20th. One more thing before we start our speaker. I guess all of you know that our executive director, Pete Daly, is no longer with us. I mean, he's in Harrisburg now. And we have a new executive director that will be starting with us in June the 8th, and I would like to introduce you to her right now. Her name is Nikki Solode Blanche. Is that correct?
I would like just to say good evening and hello to everybody. Thank you for welcoming me here tonight and just giving me a moment to say hello. I would just like to take one moment to say thank you to everyone who has been so kind and generous in welcoming me into my new position. I'm looking very forward to all the exciting new challenges ahead, and I hope to get to meet everybody personally at some point in the future. You will see a lot of me after about another few weeks after June 8th. And again, please feel free to stop in, say hello after that time, and at any point in time, give me a call and talk to me. Thank you. I will not delay your program any further. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, now for the reason that you came this evening, we have Mr. William Unger, who is from Harper's. I guess most of you know where Harper's is. Where Harper's are? No, is. He is here to talk to us tonight about the Pennsylvania German or Pennsylvania Dutch dialect and also their history. He is actually a member, if you've read his bio in the paper, he is connected to the Hack campus of Lebanon, and he's on the board down there for the German Heritage Festival. He's also on the committee for the Pennsylvania German Resources for Hack. So I would like to introduce to you Mr. Unger.
Thank you, and good evening. If you're wondering why I'm dressed like this, if you come down to the Heritage Festival the third Saturday in March, you will see me. Now, I have to apologize. I was as far as Lingle Avenue, and I remember I forgot my hat. Now, if the glare is too great, you're going to have to put sunglasses on. But my costume is authentic. This is what the German immigrant would have worn in 1730 when they came to the United States or America. This is wool. This is warm. Thank God for air conditioning. The shirt is made out of muslin. And, you know, back in Germany, they had one suit, one pair of clothing. And a lot of times the shirt was used to sleep in. Now, this would have been worn by somebody of, say, a successful shopkeeper, maybe a tailor or a banker or something like that. That's why we have all the fancy buttons, the gold braid, and the fancy lace on the sleeves. However, you know, when they finished their day, they went out into the country where they had a garden or a field where they grew their own crops. And then they would just take their sleeves and roll them up underneath, and then they could work. You know, now I use it for a different purpose. Do you ever see a Pennsylvania Dutchman who did not have a red or a blue hanky? You gotta have a red or a blue hanky. And you notice this? No, I am not one of them others. This does not have pockets. In the 1730s, there was no pockets. Revolutionary or colonial, yes, they had pockets. But this does not. This is before pockets. So when they went on their job, they carried their lunch. I carry my keys and my wallet. But that's the reason why they had the purse. Now, some of them, maybe they just carried it. But for me, I, throw it over the shoulder. And you can see, if you've seen in your old 4th grade history book, I might be a little younger than you, but my 4th grade history book had a picture of German people walking to church on a Sunday morning. Some of them carried the blunderbuss and they had something over their shoulder. Well, some of them claimed that was for shot. No, that was their lunch. The shot was in a belt underneath the jacket, in a piece of leather, protected so that it wouldn't get wet, the shot and the powder. Now, sometimes they also carried a powder horn, but those who couldn't afford a powder horn carried it in a little leather pouch. Now, where's that lady that was going to bring me a glass of water? We're getting a little dry. For some reason or other, every time I go into speaking, I get dry. I want to tell you a little story. Is there any English teachers in here, or English professionals, one way or the other, school teachers maybe? I'll tell you a story and maybe you can recognize it. But this is a different version. Johnny and Jacob were two friends of mine. They each had a farm. They lived neighbors. And Jacob went over to Johnny's house to talk about getting together to harvest the oats using the treadmill and whatever. And they got to talking a little bit, and then he said, come on in the house and I'll have Mom bring out some coffee. So he said to his wife, he said, now, you get us each a cup of coffee. She brought the coffee out, and he says, he says, would you go in there and get us each a piece of shoe fly pie? So she went in and got the shoe fly pie. And they were eating, and she says, by golly, why don't you go get us each a dish of ice cream? So she went in, didn't say a word, came out with the ice cream, and then Jacob says to Johnny, my goodness, he says, how do you get her to do that? By golly, my Becky, oh my goodness, she would scream and she would holler, get it yourself and do this and do that. And he said, I have a heck of a time with her. He said, I can't do nothing with her. She won't listen, she won't obey, nothing. And Johnny says, well, he says, you remember that old mule that I had when we first got married? So he says, yeah, he says, I remember. He says, whatever happened to that mule? Why, he says, on the way home from the wedding, he says, we were going around, the mule was going clip-clop, all of a sudden he stopped dead. So I went up to the mule and I said, that's once. Got back in the buggy, down the road we went, clip-clop, the mule stopped again. Went out, got on the buggy, went up, now that's twice. So we went back in the buggy and going a little further down, the mule stopped again. Went up to the mule, he says, now that's it, pulled the pistol out, boom, right between the eyes. That stopped that. Got back in the buggy and his wife says, now, what did you do that for? He said, that's once. Well, it was just a poor farm animal. That's twice. And he says, I never had any trouble with her ever since. Now, getting to our brief account of the Pennsylvania Germans. Now, I'm going to cover this later on, which is why we call ourselves Pennsylvania Germans and not Pennsylvania Dutch. From the time records were kept in 1820, more than 7 million Germans came to the United States until 1980. There were approximately 55 million in the U.S. of German origin. A very large number of them came before 1776. Who were the Pennsylvania Germans? Sometimes called Pennsylvania Dutch. However, the term is incorrect. They came from Germany and speak a mixture of dialects. Now, everybody knows the dialect is called Pennsylvania Dutch. It's not a language, it's a dialect. But that's incorrect. The term Dutch has to do with a mistranslation of the word Deutsch, which means Holland Dutch. See, in Pennsylvania Dutch, we're called Pennsylvania Deutsch, which is but the Germans are also called Deutsch, and that's where the misconception comes in. There's also people from the Alsace-Lorraine area, the Palatinate area, near Switzerland, North Germany, and in the early stages, Germany was still not a national state. And after the Revolutionary War, the Hessian soldiers stayed in the United States because they had it better here than you did in Europe. Now, wasn't that amazing? Which is true today. Why would they want to come here? They wanted to expand their farms. In Germany, they were limited. They wanted freedom of religion, the number one big thing. Freedom of having varying, warring armies constantly running back and forth over their crops, like the 30-Year War. That is one of the reasons you will never see an Amishman wear a button. They do not want to reflect any of their ideals onto anything that has buttons, because these well-dressed German soldiers would run back and forth across their crops, blowing people up, destroying everything, and they had these fancy buttons up and down on their coats. That is one of the reasons. German immigration began about 1683. Francis Daniel Pastores came to check on what William Penn had been writing about. He was a lawyer and a teacher. He also helped to lay out the town of Germantown. By the end of the year, there were about 50 inhabitants in the town. By the time of his death, there were about 300 inhabitants in 1719. Another large influx came in 1710 with the arrival of the Mennonites. With a steady stream of newcomers, the crest about 1749 to 1754. My ancestors came in 1748. I had my one cousin traced our ancestry. We know the year he came, we know his name, we know the ship he came on, and we know who he married after he got here. His name was, let me think of it. Now, ain't that something? It was there and now it's gone. You ever have them moments? Johann Michael was his name. Now, he married a girl named Christine. Would you believe one of their children, a son, also married a girl named Christine? Now, if you're trying to do some checking back, you can get verhudled in a hurry, and that would do it. The British saw large profits in transporting the Germans to the new country. To come to America, they had to go north on the Rhine River to Holland, at Rotterdam, then get a boat to England, and then get a British ship to America. In order to get passage, they had to bring enough food to last the journey. For you and your family or the parties, you had to bring your own water to last at least 3 weeks, even your bath water. Many Germans did not have enough money to pay passage, so they would get a sponsor and then work for the sponsor from 2 to 7 years. They could hire out on the ship for passage. In other words, if they go on the ship and maybe 3-4 trips back and forth, then the next time they could stay in America. That would pay for their passage. In 1729, all foreign males had to take the oath of allegiance to the king and the oath of fidelity to the proprietors. The conditions of indentured servants varied greatly. Some worked on the farms while others worked in some of the trades that they had in Germany. All arts and crafts were needed, so they had a large base to choose from. A number just stayed with the family until something to their liking came along. Some stayed with large families and later married into the families and still worked off their debt. I have a sneaking suspicion some of them might still be in debt. Those that came after 1720 found that the land around Germantown was getting sparse, so they had to go a little further towards Reading and even towards the Blue Mountains, and many went west towards the Susquehanna River. The peak years of German migration coincided with the developing competition between Great Britain and France for control of North America. See, that's pretty soon we'll have the French and Indian War in there too. Ben Franklin and Reverend William Smith were among the provincial leaders who not only wondered whether Germans were becoming so numerous that they would soon overrun the province, but they also questioned whether they would be loyal to Great Britain in the likely event of war with France. It was at this very time that Franklin made some of his most extreme and did in fact uncharacteristic statements about the Germans, calling them Palatine Boers, who, by herding together, were threatening to establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours. Why, he asked, should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens? Even then, Franklin admitted that the Germans are excellent husbandmen and contribute greatly to the improvement of a country. Instead of limiting or prohibiting their coming, he recommended distributing them more equally in the province, mixing them with the English. Now, just something came to my mind speaking about the English. Did I tell you that's who or where that story came from that I spoke to you of first? William Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. I forgot to tell you that night. You're gonna have to throw something at me if I forget. In 1753, Smith expressed his fear that the French would be able to entice the Germans to their side. But when the war finally came to Pennsylvania in 1754 and 55, they demonstrated beyond a doubt their loyalty to the British King and the priorities. The immigration of so many Germans to America, as well as Eastern Europe at the same time, is also a concern of the rulers of the countries they left. There is a contemporary evidence that especially during the peak years for Pennsylvania, some of those leaving were not particularly desirable subjects. Franklin, for example, accused the agents for the ship owners of securing passengers directly from German jails. For this most part, however, the immigrants were good workers, regular taxpayers, and potential soldiers. What they took with them added to some of their other domain was subtracted from the one that they left. Some rulers tried various ways to make immigration difficult and expensive. Some public figures were content to heap scorn on the people whom they charged, no longer wanted to work hard at home, who had succumbed to what was called immigration fever. Now, do you think you could go back and do what they did? Come here with nothing? I mean, they had the clothes on their back and that's about it. To start a farm, build barns, raise cattle, pigs, sheep, make clothing, grow all your own food for the whole year, that's a lot of work. Have you ever thought about that? Benjamin Franklin was only one of the colonial observers who paid tribute to the application and success of the German farmers. They were credited to being able to find the most available soil in the province. Observers praised them for their barns and houses. The barns should be mentioned first. Fences, livestock, both horses and cattle, and general attention to the fields, pastures, and meadows. Few contemporaries noted that these farm families were simply applying to their Pennsylvania acres and agriculture methods which they had brought with them from Europe. Within a generation or two of many Germans replaced the Scottish, Irish, and others who were preceded or accompanied them into the backcountry, but who were not as determined or intensive farmers as they were. Even new agricultural communities needed a certain division of labor if they are to thrive. Accordingly, some colonial Germans became country millers, blacksmiths, wagon makers, weavers, cobblers, and tavern keepers. Now, why would they want to have a tavern keeper? Unbelievably, the Germans were heavy beer drinkers. The Irish had to have their hard liquor, but the Germans gotta have their beer. For some reason or other, that's been a rule for hundreds of years. Apparently, my DNA doesn't like beer. I don't know why. It just doesn't taste right. Long before 1776, the heart of the Pennsylvania German country consisted of present counties of Montgomery, not carved out of Philadelphia till 1784, Northampton, Lehigh, Berks, Lebanon, Lancaster, and York. One generally accurate measure of the presence of Pennsylvania Germans in colonial counties is the number of Lutheran and Reformed congregations, which contained in 1776 some 185 of the 249 such congregations then in existence were in these 7 counties. There were only 20 congregations in the original counties, not including part of Philadelphia, which later became Montgomery. In 1776, there were 13 Lutheran and Reformed congregations as far north as the present Monroe, Schuylkill, Northumberland, and Snyder counties, and 8 as far west as Bedford, Westmoreland, and Fayette. In Europe, most Germans, whatever their main occupation, had lived in villages. Now this is the big difference between there and here. They lived in villages. The several acres of land which they tilled and the grazing land which they used were located outside the village, usually in strips of several different locations. For whatever reasons, the immigrants chose not to recreate the village system in Pennsylvania, although there was no legal impediment to do it. As already noted, the typical colonial German was a farmer with many acres he could call his own, perhaps separated by a mile or more from the nearest neighbor. In 1757, a Reformed pastor, William Stoy, in explaining to Dutch Reformed authorities in Europe why it was so difficult to protect people from Indian attacks then occurring, reported that the colonists here neither inhabit homes connected to one another, nor do they live in villages. They settle down and live wherever they find a spring, a river, or a grove which suit them. Stoy might have added to this practice had implications for virtually every aspect of their existence, as the Germans tried to make a satisfactory adjustment from life in Europe to life in America. Have you noticed that in the farms around here? There's almost always a spring there or a little creek going through. And then however successful they were depended on how big these farms finally became. In the early years of the province of Pennsylvania, when the underdeveloped economy forced virtually all residents to be almost or entirely self-sufficient, the level of living was primitive indeed. Like I say, could we go back to that and make a living? I'd like to try it. I have the talent. I'd like to try it. Among the many Germans who contributed to the economic development of colonial Pennsylvania was William Rittenhouse, a Mennonite preacher who in 1690 began operating what is believed the first paper mill in the colonies. It was located near Wissahickon Creek, which is now in Philadelphia across the Delaware River in New Jersey. Caspar Weister opened an early glass works which continued in operation for half a century, and after a career as an iron maker, Henry William Stiegel, or Stiegel, whichever you, began making glass in the 1760s in Lancaster County, town of Mannheim. Before bankruptcy closed his works less than a decade later, Stiegel had salesmen in towns from Baltimore to Boston, and his advertising urged people to prefer American-made glass products to imported goods. Now, I do a lot of tour guiding in Schaefferstown Museum, and we have 2 stove plates cast by the Stiegel foundry there in the museum that someone found in a house that fell together, and we have it down there. One of them is in bad shape, and the other one is in pretty good shape yet. Let's see. During the first half of the 18th century, German gunsmiths began producing the long rifle, or the Pennsylvania rifle, which also called the Kentucky rifle. A weapon which, because of its spiral grooves cut inside the barrel, was much more accurate than the musket and other firearms then in general use. Although the weapon subsequently gained fame as the Kentucky rifle, it was of Pennsylvanian origin. One of the first, and for its time, best organ builders in colonial America, David Tannenberg. He began making organs and pianos in 1750, and he was still at work when he died a half-century later. David Rittenhouse made clocks, probably the first American telescope, and other instruments. In addition, in the late 1760s, he designed his famous orrery, or planetarium, which used spheres of various sizes to illustrate movements in the solar system. You know, the Germans must have really been something. In each Pennsylvania county there had been a town in which the courts could meet and other county business could be transacted. But a few exceptions, such as Germantown, Bethlehem, and Shippensburg, the towns founded before the French and Indian War, were all county seats. Philadelphia, also the provincial capital. Chester, Newton, Lancaster, York, Carlisle, Reading, and Easton, each of those supported tradesmen and artisans. There was a sufficient German element in most of these places, and in several, such as Reading, Lancaster, and York, it was predominant. Beginning in 1758, new towns were laid out, including Allentown, Pottstown, Lebanon, Jonestown, Fredericksburg, Middletown, Almostown, Mannheim, which Henry William Stiegel founded in 1762. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, if you ever go through, I think it's Hummelstown had it, Lebanon had it, Fredericksburg and Jonestown still have it, is a town square, where the road comes into town and then everything spreads out. In Lebanon, the place used to be called, it's on the north side now, Liberty Square. I know years ago they had a big grass area in the middle where you drove out around. Well, they had to have parking space so the grass grew. And the beauty of it, it just, but Fredericksburg and Jonestown still have their wide middle section of town, and I'm sure, I don't remember what happened to the one in Hummelstown, but I know the street used to widen out, but the last time I went through, it was gone. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if it's a place to turn off now, but you know, these people with need for space, they get new ideas, and the beauty just flies. The largest body of German sect people in colonial Pennsylvania were the Mennonites, spiritual descendants of the Menno Simmons, a contemporary of Martin Luther. They began arriving in numbers about 1710. perhaps as many as 4,000 or 5,000 came, most of them settling in present Montgomery and Lancaster counties. The Amish, disciples of Jacob Ammon, a Swiss, were formed in the 1690s as a succession from the Mennonites when they adopted their main distinctive practice, the complete shunning of those members who had been disciplined or excommunicated from their ranks. Most Amish came in the 1740s, and most settled in the region where Chester, Lancaster, and Berks County boundaries meet. Now, in this day, they're in Lebanon County, they're in Lancaster County, they're in Canada, they're in Indiana, they're in Ohio. They don't have enough farm area anymore, so they're spreading out, and they take their ideas with them. They still don't drive cars, although some Amish boys have been known to buy cars when they leave, but then they can't come back. And some Amish girls have married into the so-called Englishers, they call them. The German Baptist Brethren, sometime called Dunkers or Dunkards, and now the Church of the Brethren, were formed in Germany in 1708 under the leadership of Alexander Mack. Their main distinctive sect believes that the prospective members should be baptized as adults by being immersed 3 times, face forward, into a flowing stream. Whatever you did, you didn't choose the winter time to become baptized. You waited till spring or summer. They began coming to Pennsylvania in 1719, and within a decade, virtually the entire membership, a few more than 200, had relocated here. Settling first in Germantown, they had congregations as far west as Franklin and Bedford counties. A number of new sects were organized in colonial Pennsylvania as early as the 1690s. The Seventh-day Baptist cloister began by John Conrad Bissell, who arrived in Pennsylvania in 1720 and joined the church in 1732, took up land which is now called Ephrata, and founded a commune of men and women, most of whom pleaded to celibacy, and all whom observed the 7th day of the week as their Sabbath. The community constructed several buildings, including a flour mill, sawmill, paper mill, printing press. After Bissell's death, leadership was passed on to John Peter Miller, who left the German Reformed ministry and moved to Ephrata. Almost 90% of the Germans were church people and were affiliated in some way to the Lutheran or Reformed Church in Europe. The Lutheran Church resulted from its efforts of Martin Luther and others to reform the Roman Catholic Church. Ulrich Zwingli and Philip Melanchthon, John Calvin, and others, to name a few. Later, the Lutheran and Reformed churches banded together and organized separate and definite congregations, which then built one building. After they entered into a formal written agreement regulating its use, one Sunday afternoon, or one Sunday would be Lutheran service, and the next Sunday would be a Reformed service. By about 1776, almost half of the Lutheran and Reformed churches worshiped together as union churches. Now most of them, if you would go, I know where there's still one Lutheran and Reformed church left, you wouldn't know the difference which service you're sitting in, because they've adopted more or less the service program setup of the United Church of Christ. It's so close, I don't know the difference. A small body of Roman Catholics worshipped in the Philadelphia area and south central Berks County and in Adams County. The Moravians also settled under the influence of Nicholas Louis Count Zinzendorf, who had them settle on his estate. Several instances of public education by some churches began but never had much success. Schoolmasters were hard to find. They did teaching, preaching, did records, led the singing, prayer, played the organ, if any, and farmed the land, and usually at least 50 acres. They lived in the schoolhouse, and some of the earlier schools were taught in English and German. Some were started after the French and Indian War, and the program ended about 1763 or 1764. Many of the artifacts which the Germans used in 1783 have probably long since disappeared, leaving little or no trace of their existence. However, enough remains for us to draw some conclusion as to what few items they brought when they came from Germany. They had almost nothing that was produced in the old country. As they acquired more money, they bought items produced in England and Germany. At the time, some artisans were able to use both German and English patterns in their work to create models of their own for use in the kitchen, the parlor, the bedroom. They made clocks, chests, tables, chairs, benches, cupboards, desks, earthenware, kitchen utensils, pewterware, and glass. Textiles and many items used for farming, from plows to wagons and harness. Most of the artwork was plain, but as time went on, some of the items became more decorated and quite elaborately, until a source comes along that explains why they started to decorate a chest or a piece of earthenware. One can only say that it was made to be more attractive for the buyer. You've seen some of the chests that they have the tulips and the flowers and the birds, and, well, something that was well known, but they made them different colors and made them more beautiful. Let's see, where were I? Some of the most attractive items of the colonial Germans' culture were the decorated documents, one of a kind or another, which was called Proctor. Some were drawings of birds and flowers, samples of fine writing, which teachers like Christopher Dock or other schoolmasters gave their students for work well done. The residents of the Ephrata cloisters produced many illuminated pieces. The Reverend Daniel Schumacher, 1754 to 1773, a Lutheran pastor in Lehigh and Berks County, prepared more than 200 pieces of Proctor in the form of birth and baptism for certificates. Now, when you go to an auction or a sale, if you see one of those, if you want it, you better have brought a lot of money, because there's not that many left, and they do go high. German language printing in Pennsylvania began in 1728 by English printers in Philadelphia. Ben Franklin, for example, and then in 1738 Christopher Saar in Germantown. The first number of Saar's most famous, let me get this right, Hochdeutsche Amerikanische Kalender, bore the date 1739. 4 years after he published the first complete English language Bible, he also issued religious tracts, catechisms, and hymnals. The Amish hymnal Asbund first came in 1742, and in the 1750s Storer printed the Marburg hymnal for Lutheran and Reformed use. In 1745, the Ephrata Brethren printed the Mennonite Book of Martyrs and others. Now, as you can see, the first books printed in the United States were Bibles and hymnals and songbooks, which, if I can tell you, if you want to study the Pennsylvania German language, the easiest way is to do it through song. learn the songs. There's still a lot of them around. They're printed, but they're hidden. You have to really hunt to find them. I don't have any with me now, but learn the songs. That's how I learned German in school. We did a lot of singing, and that's how you learn. After you sang it once or twice, okay, now what do the words mean? Then you go through it bit by bit, and then it's like a piece of cake. Christopher Saar began publishing newspapers in Germantown about 1739, and in 1750 about 4,000 copies circulation. In 1762, Henry Miller took over till he retired in 1769. Now here we get to our National Guard. The Pennsylvania militia had thousands of Germans, men and boys enrolled. It was the law. They were required to drill a certain number of days per month and was subject to call at any time for service within the state to repel invasions, fight Indians, or guard prisoners of war. The Germans who wanted to do more joined the German regiment or some other unit in the Continental Army. The regiment was organized in 1776 and recruited from Pennsylvania and Maryland. It continued in service until 1781. Germans also provided food, drink, munitions, wagons and wheels and rifles for the war effort. They helped staff hospitals to care for the wounded and purchase government securities to help finance the war. The best known officer in the Continental Army was Peter Muhlenberg. He served as Brigadier General in the Continental Army from 77 to 83. That's 1777 to 83. In 1789 in Philadelphia, a physician wrote, "A German farm may be distinguished from the farms of others in the state by their superior size of the farms, the plain but compact form of their houses, the height of their enclosures, the extent of their orchards, and fertility of their fields, and the luxuriance of their fields and meadows, the general appearance of plenty of neatness in everything that belongs to them." In other words, you could tell a Pennsylvania German farm from another farm because it was so much neater, so much corners were square, you knew. Dr. Rush also had good words for the mechanics, when he meant weavers, tailors, tanners, shoemakers, smiths, and all kinds of butchers, watchmakers, and others. They were industrious, frugal, punctual, and just. He believed that if it were possible to compare the property that the Germans brought with them to Pennsylvania and their post-war holdings, the contrast would form such a monument of human industry and economy as has seldom been contemplated in any age or country. He appealed to the legislator to recognize that in human manners and arts that they possess an inexhaustible treasure in the bosom of the state. Now the reason I'm a little stuttering on this page is I started with an electric typewriter. Halfway through this, it went up in smoke. So I got my old hit the key as hard as you can typewriter because the ribbon was shot. So it's not as dark as it should be. So I have to, and my eyes aren't what they were 60 years ago. We'll get it though. Some well-known governors as Simon Snyder, Joseph Heister, John Andrew Schultz, George Wolfe, Joseph Redner, Francis Schunk, and William Bigler. For many Pennsylvania Germans, the 19th century brought many occupations for seeking welcome relief from the day-to-day work the routines of work. The seasons of Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, and others bearing the most popular with family feasting and merriment. Some of the minor days like Pentecost, Ascension Day, Good Friday, Shrove Tuesday, Fastnacht Day, town fairs, Italian Day, and annual militia. Other minor days like Groundhog Day and hunting for elvedriches were just for fun. Did anybody ever go hunting for elvedriches? No, you didn't.
Yes. No, I did.
And I bet you didn't find any.
No, I didn't.
You know, I was supposed to go and I chickened out. Now, some people call them elvedriche, elmerdriche, and I don't know what all. But the correct, yeah, I'll get it out yet. More water, please. The correct pronunciation for in Pennsylvania German is elvedriche. One thing that, like I was covering here, the Pennsylvania Germans do like to party. And weddings and funerals were days of food and celebration. Shooting in the new year were just known for lots of drink and merrymaking. Now, does anybody know what a powwow doctor is? Did you ever? Were any of you ever powwowed for?
I would.
Any more? That's why I'm here today.
My grandmother powwowed for me.
The doctor told my father he's only going to live 2 days. This is what was told me. And my father went up into the mountain and got Mrs. Wolf, and she came down and powwowed for me. And I'll be 70 this summer. Now, I don't want to put you to shame, but when I was in Taiwan, this is how the people would sit down every evening and talk. Now, you can't do that because you can't get back up. Like I said, I'll be 70 this summer. Not, yeah, I don't want to put nobody to shame. Don't try that. I've been doing that for years. And I have a wood stove in my basement. Wood stove eats wood, 10 cords a year. And right now I'm in the process of cutting logs this big, 2 foot long, lift them up, put them in a log splitter, cut them into pieces, and that is hard work. If I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't be able to get down there like that and back up. Now, there was a time I could lift up 200 pounds, but for some reason or other, it's gone down to about 150. Okay, powwow doctoring. That was one thing that was brought by the Germans. And the way that it works, you have to believe. The doctor has to believe. If one or the other doesn't believe, he can't do a thing for you. We also have, in the Shaperstown Museum, we have a powwow chair. If you come down sometime, the Cherry Fair is coming up. I think it's the 20th of June or 21st. It's a Saturday. I'll be in the museum. Come down. I'll show you how this thing works. And they also have a log there. Oh, it might have been a 2.5 foot diameter tree. It's a section of a log. Has 2 pegs in it. Behind this peg was a little cloth. In that little cloth was a lock of hair. What they did, if you would get sick, they would believe that somebody put a curse on you. They would take a lock of your hair, wrap it up in that little cloth, bore a hole in the tree, put the cloth in with the hair in, and hammer a stake in behind it. That way you'd get better, the curse would go away, and you'd get better. And the person would that put the curse on you wouldn't be able to do it again to you. Now those are, you know, superstitions and beliefs. The downfall of the Pennsylvania German dialect came in 1911. The Pennsylvania legislature passed a law that said that no Pennsylvania German shall be spoken on the school premises. In many instances, students were punished, sometimes severely, not always by teachers, but bullies and other no-accounts. Teachers would sometimes slap, pull hair, smack their fingers with a ruler. And during the First World War, many times the dialect was mistaken for German language and fear or terror would erupt. However, during the Second World War, some of the soldiers found that their dialect was similar to what the soldiers were speaking themselves, and they talked themselves out of many scrapes. Now, I don't know if you knew that or not, but the true Pennsylvania German language is very similar to what they speak in the Palatinate area. You can converse with the people in that area. However, if you go closer to Poland, forget it. It's different. In this day and age, many people would like to learn the dialect, but the time and effort to do so are not there. There are a number that still have some 10-week courses set up to teach the dialect, such as Alice Spade and Francis Klein. Now, I have a few proverbs here, a few tales, a few beliefs. It's easy to cook in someone else's kitchen. Never heard that? If you have to swallow a toad, it's best not to look at it too long. Everybody carries his own hide to the tannery. Falling down is nothing, but getting up is something. A father can raise 10 children more easily than 10 children can support their father. Now, a wet April and a cool May bring a farmer grain and hay. Green Christmas, white Easter. Remember this past Christmas? Green, warm, nice, walk around t-shirts. Easter we had snow. Remember that? Green Christmas, white Easter. Morning showers and an old woman's dance do not last long. Warts will disappear if rubbed with a piece of potato, or beans, or a dishcloth, a penny, or bacon rind, which is then buried under the eaves of the room. Now, I was always told that you could take, if you had a wart, take a potato, cut it in half, take one half, rub the wart, throw it into the pigs, and scream as loud as you can until the pigs ate the potato. Then the wart would go away. And I always asked the question, I was dumb, what about the other half of the potato? And they never gave me an answer. Maybe I asked the wrong question. A whistling girl and a crowing hen should have their necks wrung. Now, so old as Tasiva Yoa Gretz. Anybody have any idea what that is? As old as a 7-year itch. So autumn as in Karikamas, as poor as a church mouse. Then you have Anaya Basem Keat Good. A new broom sweeps good. Then there's We Die Bet Macht So Leicht. I heard that 20,000 times if I heard it once. The way you make your bed, that's the way you're going to sleep. Do any of you remember the Pennsylvania Dutch days here at Hershey? Going back to let me get this, it's way back in there, 53. My sister was a Pennsylvania lot whiting queen, which is apple butter. And the principal from Robizonia High School was the Wundernaus. And he was here. And one of his sermons was, "We die bedmacht so leicht." I wish I had a copy of that today. That was a 1-hour speech. And it made, it really made sense. It covered everybody. Now, why would I remember that? But I can't remember any of your names. Autumn is Ken Shun. Poor is no disgrace. Autumn is Ken Shun awa unhandy. It's no disgrace, but unhandy. Autumn, but ehrlich. Poor, but honest. Autumn allied and die menschste Kinder. The poorest people have the most children. I'm not boring you with this, am I? The autumn man muss all Geld haben. The poor man must have money too. The autumn man kan goed slapen. A poor man can sleep good. Now this is it's a tongue twister. If you think I get my tongue twisted in English, you should hear sometimes in Pennsylvania German. Wanneer een schriftlich is, sagt man, du bist des Hinners verrast aufgestanden. When one is a little crabby, you tell them, you got out of bed wrong. Now here's the woman Hinners verrast, want mij is Hinners verrast als een bed geht selber dog alles Hinners verrast. If you get up wrong in the morning, all day long, you'll be doing wrong. Een puk auf die Zunge bedeutet, als du gelogen hast. A pimple on the tongue means that you lied. Now, spaat's nou 3-mal ins Feuer und sie geht weg. Spit 3 times into the fire, then it'll go away. I have a little story here that goes back to the 19th century. Harry had a horse called Herman, and he and Herman were inseparable. And Harry had a little bit of money left over from the crops, and he told his wife, "Mom, I'm going into town. I'm going to get something to surprise you." So he hitched Herman to the wagon and they headed on for town, clip clop into town. And he went into the mercantile store and he said, "Now I want to buy a suit. I'm going to surprise Mom. I'm going to put the suit on and surprise Mom when we get home." So he and Herman are going down the road, clip clop, and they come to the creek. Well, now Harry had brought along a washcloth and a towel and good underclothes and what have you, and so I'm going to wash up and put on my new suit and give Mom her surprise. Okay, so he took his clothes off and went down the bank to the creek and was there washing, and getting all the dust and everything else off and the road dirt and whatever, they took a bath once a month whether they needed it or not. This was his time of the month. Anyway, while he's down there taking a bath, somebody stole his clothes. The new suit. wrapped up in the, you know how they wrap them in a brown paper, just wrapped around and then put a string around. Remember the old stores? You bought something and it was wrapped up in brown paper with a string around? Well, that's how the suit was wrapped, and somebody stole the suit. By golly, they stole his other clothes too. He come up to the wagon, everything's gone. Grabbed a hold of the reins and said, well, come on, Herman, we'll go home and surprise Mom anyhow. Now, I'm not, I don't know if I'm boring any of you or not, but I have something here. It's called the Pennsylvania German ABCs. A couple of them now. This is how they would learn to teach the kids the ABCs. A steht für Esel, Stiefbruder zum Gaul, and schlapperig gedia und natürlich faul. That's A is for Esel or the mule. Brother-in-law to the horse, flop-eared thing and very lazy. Okay. B is for Buddha, geel Wowerschmier. Steht auf a broodwashed, pretzels und Bier. Well, now you know what the broodwashed, pretzels and beer. Sausage, pretzels and beer. And the geel Wowerschmier, that's the grease that they used for the wagon wheels. C steht für Cider, der sagt mal wie schlapp. Und so gibt them als Bachway, mir hens schon oft kalt. In other words, C is for cider. We drink it like slop. We often had stomach ache from it. We often had it. D is for ducks, de altwettervervid. Maar zet hem als bikse, wanneer zij schade zijn. Ducks is the groundhog. D is for the groundhog, the old weather prophet. We ought to shoot him when he sees his shadow. That's what it means. E steht für Elbetritje. Sie sind noch nicht shy, aber man nimmt just einen Sock und jagt sie dort nahe. E is for the Elbetritches I talked about. They're very shy. You just hold a bag and chase them in. So it's like she said. It was done for jokes, dumbness, whatever. F is for Falsnacht, die Fettkuchenzeit. Die letzte Fahles in Bed is the old Falsnacht high. There was a saying that the last one out of bed had to empty the ashes, and he was called the Falsnacht. And the Falsnacht, you naturally know, are the donuts. But not the donuts, the round donuts with the hole. The earlier ones had like just cut out square with two slices or ones to sew it through the middle so it would fry quicker, so it wouldn't be raw in the middle. And did anybody know why the hole is in the donut? That's the reason. So it fries finished all the way inside and out. If you wouldn't, it would start burning on the outside before the middle is finished. G is for greenbacks and all Papiergeld, Kauf Strohheit verhitzt und Kohle verkehlt. G is for greenbacks, or money. A kind of paper. It buys straw to make heat, or straw for when it's cold, and coal to make. I'll get this right yet. It buys straw and coal when it's cold. Straw for the heat for insulation. That's what they're getting at. Oh, let me go down here. L is for ladwarig, im Kessel geriat. Es kocht etmals immer und lässt alles verschmieren. Sometimes L is for ladwarig or apple butter. You stir it in the kettle. I don't know if you've ever seen apple butter being cooked. It takes a good 8 hours. and sometimes it boils over and makes a real mess. That's what they're talking about. P is for panhals. Als is geen hals drin. Doch gibt's net veel Sachen des appetitlicher sind. Now, Scrabble. You know what panhals is? Scrabble. But there's no rabbit in it. You know, a hals is a rabbit. There's no rabbit in it. That's, you know, people can really get verhoodled when they get into the translation. It doesn't give many things that become more appetizing. Do you know what's in Scrabble? Whatever is left over from the pig, that goes into the Scrabble. Or the beef. Somebody told me everything goes in but the squeal. I used to be a custom butcher. I'd go around from farm to farm for about 20 years until I had 2 heart attacks, and I said, now that's the end of that. But I used to make really good Scrabble. But you can't do it unless you use a little bit of everything, which includes the tongue and the kidneys and some liver and
Don't tell me
feed.
that.
Oh, it's delicious. It really, the seasoning you put in, the salt, the pepper, the coriander, and all that other good stuff, that is what gives it its flavor. Now, I have a survey. We're doing a survey. I don't have the. If you want one, you'll have to get a hold of me or Alice Spade. We're doing a survey on whether or not you were punished in school for speaking Pennsylvania German. It's just a little short 1-page form to fill out. I have one here, but there's another one since this one, that if you were punished in school for speaking Pennsylvania German, we'd like if you would fill it out and let us know who it was and how old you were, or you know, what happened and who did it and why. Now, I had my hair pulled and, well, you know, there's none left. That's what happened to me. And I was also beat up on the school ground because somebody got my goat and I left to know what I thought of them in the same Pennsylvania German language, and that I later found out that this man that did the beating up when he was younger also speaks Pennsylvania German, and he knew when I called him. I think that made him mad. Now, if does anyone have anything, any questions, whatever?
My brother went to Germany, and last night was not even a dirty tasting for German. Like, things go away.
I can't.
I said, my brother was playing his cross now. And over in Germany, we need something in college, so we can use state before away. My brother, he saw right here in Willing with the work ago.
Anyone else have anything? If not, that's all I have. I hope I didn't bore you to death.
Okay, well, we want to thank Mr. Unger. Let's give him a hand for his presentation. And you know what comes next. We have a raffle. Did everyone get a copy of what is on our raffle tonight? If not, or if somebody does not have tickets and wants tickets, I think Barbara is going to Is there anybody who does not have tickets that wants them? Back here, Barb. That's it. Help. And by the way, when we're finished with our raffle, please don't forget our table of refreshments. We have a very nice table tonight, beautiful table as a matter of fact. And I would like to thank Joe Albright and her people for having our refreshments this evening.
Does anybody else want tickets?
Anybody else want tickets? Okay, I guess everybody who wants them has them. If you'll stir them up and bring them up here, Barb. I think you all are aware, the first person to win gets first choice of any of the things on your sheet. And we go down the line until we have the last one finished. How about asking our speaker first to pick?
Nine 6702.
Does somebody have it? Yes, I do. And which one would you like? I'm sorry? Oh, okay. There you go.
Oh, she's
Then-
taking the dinner cruise. Oh, that's not
Okay.
right. 9496706.
Over there. What would you like? Railroad? Well, let's see if I can find the railroad here. Oysters. There you go. You're welcome.
Nine 6682.
Anybody have that number? What would you like?
I'll take the strawberries.
Okay. Oh, fun. You're welcome.
Nine 6697.
There we go. We have a winner back here. Ed. Costco. There you go. We have, let's see, 2 left.
9496711.
Back here. We have the gardens and the Epworth oysters.
Nine 9496699.
Oh, over here. Very good. Here. Oh, you can just give it to her. There you go. Okay, well, I thank all of you for coming out this evening. This is our last program for the year. We'll see you here hopefully next October. Please enjoy our refreshments.